You may have heard of linear storytelling, a format where the events of the story happen in a specific order, usually in a chronological order. You may also have heard of non-linear storytelling, where events of the story are not revealed in a chronological order. Of course, in both these cases, we are talking about a story which has a plot, a beginning, a middle, and end. It may be an open end, but it is an end nonetheless. But what do you say about a story that begins in one world with one character and ends in another world with a different character? When you watch Court, you'll find that it is less of a story and more of a hyper-realistic portrayal of a series of mundane events that just happen. But the events are in no way random. In fact, every moment we are exposed to is meticulously crafted, not so much to reveal plot, but to reveal character. On the surface, Court is the story of how a Dalit activist, Narayan Kamble, is falsely accused of abetment of suicide of a sanitation worker. But as we watch the film, we realize that it isn't simply the story of an activist, but the story of a larger character, the courtroom itself. This character is created by a bunch of other characters whose lives we are taken through one by one. Even the drama in the courtroom itself isn't dramatic, where the one standing up for justice has a heroic win at the end. After all, justice isn't something that comes from divine intervention. It depends on people, the people who seek it, the people who oppose it, and the people who impart it. So who are these people? There are 4 major characters whose lives we are taken through one by one. The first is of course the accused Narayan Kamble. A good point to note before we talk about him is the framing. This film at no point features a close-up of a character and always makes sure it shows us each character in their environment. Narayan's environment is quite clear from the start. He teaches underprivileged kids in a tiny room, he takes public transport, and performs songs against the establishment. This is pretty much all we know about him before his character introduction is interrupted by an arrest. Narayan's simplicity comes out in Court too, when he gives straightforward answers to every question without fearing the consequences.
सफाई कामगारांनो, आपण सगळे गटारात गुदमरून जीव देऊया. या विषयावर त्या दिवशी तुम्ही कुठलं गाणं गायलं होतं का?
नाही.
असं कुठलं गाणं तुम्ही आधी लिहिलंय का?
अजून तरी नाही.
म्हणजे असं गाणं तुम्ही लिहू शकाल? तुमच्या हरकत नाही असं गाणं लिहायला?
नाही.
Despite being told not to carry on with his line of work after his release, he continues anyway. Overall, Narayan Kamble isn't a man who wants to waste his time. He knows that the fight for social justice can wait for nothing and no one. After Kamble's arrest, we are introduced to the second major character, Vinay Vohra, who is Kamble's lawyer. He too is introduced through his work. At this point, our focus is drawn to the case at hand. Here we are introduced to the character of the justice system, where the police has its way without presenting a proper case.
आप बता सकते हैं कि किन चार्जेस पे अरेस्ट किया है उन्हें?
तुम्ही सांगितलं नाही यांना? ये तभी साथ ही थे.
नहीं, आपने क्या बताया? आपने कुछ नहीं बताया उधर.
Notice the bleakness of the police station with its low light conditions and the darkness surrounding it. From darkness of the police station, we are taken to the dullness of court. What's interesting in this courtroom is that before Narayan Kamble's case is heard, we see the complete hearing of a small theft. And after Kamble's case is heard, we see the judge decide the case of a crowd of people who are traveling in the wrong compartment of a local train. The simple reason why the audience is put through this mundanity is to establish how the court really functions. It is in many ways a regular office where work goes on, where a man's right to free speech is no more important than another man's stolen watch. Moving on, we continue to focus on Vinay. Vinay is clearly passionate about human rights issues like discrimination based on caste and religion. But notice what happens when he tries to talk about these issues.
Interrogation sessions lasting 14 hours at a stretch.
Vinay is rudely interrupted, almost comically, with a fan, and the audience immediately sets off into its own dialogue. This is a portrayal of how these issues sometimes turn into mere discussions that can be turned on and off. And that is the kind of world Vinay inhabits. He shops at gourmet supermarkets, goes to elite jazz clubs, lives in a fancy apartment with his family, and comes home to the loneliness of primetime debates. Vinay is the odd one out in the courtroom at all times. He does not speak his client's language, but the prosecutor and the judge do.
दुसरं काय
Excuse
करायचं?
me, Your Honor.
Sorry for the interruption. I would like to request my colleague to converse either in Hindi or English.
नहीं एक्चुअल मेरे को मराठी में ज़्यादा बेहतर रहेगा.
You don't worry. I'll translate it for you if you don't understand anything.
He lives the most lavish lifestyle out of all, but most importantly, he speaks progressive language to an audience that doesn't understand him.
It's a Victorian law dating back to 1876. And it's up to our judgment about its relevance in a post-colonial country.
No, but this is not a valid argument. It is the law, it is there.
He doesn't belong to the society of prejudice that his client, the judge, and the prosecutor belong to. When he is harassed or assaulted for speaking up for justice in court, his spirit does break momentarily, but he rejuvenates himself with a good spa treatment. After spending time in his prosperous world, we are taken to a starkly different world, the place where Vasudev lived. Vasudev was the sanitation worker whose suicide Narayan has been accused of abetting. While we never see Vasudev, his life is displayed before us through his surroundings. After a round of courtroom proceedings, we begin to follow the prosecutor, Nutan. Nutan travels via local trains with her friend. They discuss saris and bazaars and the day-to-day of running a household. She cooks for her family like a good housewife and carries on her social engagements along with work. At work, her colleagues talk about building temples and the speed at which a judge does his work.
अहो आता आमचीच केस घ्या ना नारायण कांबळेवाली 20 वर्ष डांबा आणि संपवा मॅटर पण त्याच गोष्टी तेच चेहरे कंटाळा आला.
Clearly to Nutan, the justice system is little more than office work. With her family, she watches a play about Marathi pride, the kind that does not tolerate the presence of so-called infiltrators.
तर मराठी माणूस कोणाची आयमाय एक करू शकतो, कोणाची आयमाय काढू शकतो.
Before we move on to the final character, let's look at the central character, the courtroom itself. The courtroom is the place where Narayan Kamble is questioned based on his past political background, where the police present a witness that later turns out to be bogus, and where the judge refuses to hear a case because a person involved in the case isn't dressed modestly. While we wait for the truth to come out, frustrated with the unending tedium, we finally hear from Vasudev's wife, Sharmila. Until this point, Vasudev was a mere shadow looming over the proceedings that were focused on Kamble. But as Sharmila reveals the whole story, we understand the core issue that has been missing from the court all along. The whole reason the police caught Narayan Kamble was to hold him responsible for the government's failures towards its sanitation workers. Vasudev had no protective gear and had to be drunk to tolerate the inhumanity of his working conditions. And while the court hears the truth of the matter, it does not consider the real problem. Sharmila also has no time to worry about systemic failures as she has to feed her family first. The Dalit struggle too becomes apparent at this point, and it is clear now why Narayan Kamble does what he does, even if his performances have the tiniest of impact and are followed by item numbers by young children. Anyway, Kamble is finally granted bail and the court proceeds to the next case. But the cycle continues as Kamble is again picked up on bogus charges and again has to go through the same courtroom. But this time, it is on the last day of the sessions court and Kamble must either wait for the end of the summer vacations or appeal to the High Court for justice. As the courtroom empties out, the lights are turned off and we are plunged into darkness. This living, breathing institution of justice will now be asleep as the world waits for it to do its job. You'd think that this is the end of the film, but we still have one more character to follow, the man who represents justice itself, the judge. It turns out the judge is a family man who is a part-time finance pro.
महिन्याला 4 लाख in hand.
But his nature as a judge is revealed in the way he deals with children. His solution to a child's inability to speak is this.
तू याच्या नावामध्ये बदल करून बघ. याच्या नावात काहीतरी गडबड आहे. तू एखाद्या चांगल्या न्यूमरोलॉजिस्टला गाठ.
And in the final moment of the film, we see him do this. In a perfect portrayal of the justice system, this shows how the system focuses on all the wrong issues and provides arbitrary punishment. One can't expect justice from a man who believes in numerology and the powers of the universe. Overall, court is a simple portrayal of the organisms who make society what it is. So the next time we wonder why justice is often delayed and why the real issue is forgotten, we might want to consider if the justice system really is about justice, or if it is just another workplace where life goes on. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please share it, like it, and leave a comment. Tell me what you think. And do subscribe to my channel for more videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye.